Oh, hello. It's custom that when a game is good, it gets a sequel that makes you appreciate the original just a little bit more. Whether that be because it makes you appreciate the original as a crucial stepping stone to get to this higher point, or because it's so bad that it makes you regret having ever wanted more after playing that original game. Every sequel falls into one of those two categories if you ignore all of the ones that don't. So where does Metroid Prime 2 fall? Metroid Prime 1 is considered to be one of the greatest games of all time by many, myself included. And it sold incredibly well for a Gamecube game, so naturally Nintendo asked Retro Studios to make another one, hopefully this time with less strict deadlines. As far as I know, it was more lenient since Retro opted to reuse as few assets as possible, which would have been a really dumb move if they didn't have more time. But what do I know about game development? Maybe it did make more sense. They also decided to implement more legacy Metroid abilities that didn't make the cut for Prime 1 due to that game's time constraints. Then on top of that, they added a multiplayer mode. And I'll get this out of the way, this is a neat distraction, and if it's missing from a potential Prime 2 remastered, I would miss it, I think. But it's not giving Halo a run for its money. Prime was always more of a first-person adventure than shooter, and that doesn't translate as well to multiplayer versus. Retro also decided to put a bigger emphasis on the story. There are still lore logs that explain the lore, but this game has actual cutscenes and characters that actually speak to Samus. She doesn't speak back, which is a little rude, but it's neat to see another living being that's not trying to kill me. They also figured that since Prime 1 was meant to get players accustomed to the new style of gameplay, that they could take the gloves off for Prime 2 and make it a bit harder, making the player always worried about their health. Even making a few of the bosses harder last second. I'll get into that can of worms later. This is something the devs would seemingly regret because as far as I know, a lot of tweaks were made to make the game less difficult in the Metroid Prime Trilogy version. And you know what? Maybe I should have played this one instead. This game had an interesting marketing push. Apparently there were websites and forums made to act like real articles and posts made in the world of Metroid. There was even a flash point and click version of the game that I couldn't get to work even on Wayback Machine, so I couldn't play it myself, but looking at videos, it's certainly a website from 2004. The last thing I'll say is, good lord, is this an expensive game. From what I've seen online, it isn't as bad as when I got my copy. For reference, I found mine in person for about 80 bucks, and at the time, it was a steal. Now that's about the normal price I find it for when I look, but it's in a sea of people just selling the case or even the demo disc that sometimes came with Prime 1. From what I know, the game isn't the best emulated either, but last I heard of it was a few years ago, and when I Google it, the first thing that shows up is an 8-year-old Reddit post, so who knows, maybe it emulates perfectly fine now. Either way, if you want this game, you're gonna have to work for it until Nintendo gets wise and drops the remaster. Samus gets a job from the Galactic Federation to find a group of Marines that have gone MIA on the planet Aether. On her way down, lightning disables her ship and she makes an emergency crash landing on the surface where she begins her search. She finds them pretty quickly though, and yeah, they're dead as shit. Until this dark force reanimates them, turning them into zombies. She continues exploring the planet to find out what happened when she runs into Dark Samus, who she chases into this weird portal. Some sort of door to darkness, perhaps? I mean, these guys kind of look like the Unversed if you got hit in the head with a metal bat a bunch of times. She's caught off guard when she's exposed to the atmosphere of this dark dimension that I can only assume smells like Boston. She's overwhelmed and is sent back through the portal, having lost most of her abilities. But we get to keep Morph Ball, Charge Beam, and the Various suit this time, so I guess an explosion that didn't even reach her is more dangerous than whatever lurks in this dark dimension. Also, the Various suit is just cosmetic for this game since there aren't any hot areas, and it's definitely not doing much in terms of damage reduction. This is our first real look at Dark Samus, who we know as the Metroid Prime after sapping Samus of the Phazon suit. Weirdly enough, when looking into the development of this game, the idea of having an antagonist that's not some giant beast but is instead the size of Samus was mainly inspired by Metroid Zero Mission. I'm sure it wasn't the only inspiration, but it's the main one I saw brought up, and the example was the Chozo Ruins test where you see a mirror image of Samus, and not the SAX from Metroid Fusion, which is almost the exact same idea as Dark Samus. It's a dangerous being that latched onto her power suit and formed into a replica of her at full power, so it's weird that this was not mentioned at all, but Zero Mission was. Though I kind of get where they're coming from with the mirror angle since Dark Samus' inclusion matches with the themes of the game that we'll get into later, and by later I mean right now, as Samus, realizing she can't let some dark clone of herself wander around without getting its ass kicked, starts searching the rest of the planet and not only finds out that the Marines were wiped out by the same
disgusting black creatures,
but she finds a temple with one of the last surviving inhabitants of the planet. Umos, the last sentinel of the Luminoth that used to live here, explains to Samus that the planet Aether was hit by a meteor similar to the one that hit Talon 4 and brought Phase onto the planet. But because Aether was already unstable, it resulted in another Aether being formed in another dimension, so now two versions of Aether exist in the light and dark realm. This has created a power struggle as there's only one planet's worth of energy, and if one would hold all of the power, then the other would be destroyed. Dark Aether is filled with these dark beings called the Ing, who have been trying to take all of the energy for Dark Aether. So Umos asks Samus to find all of the temples in Dark Aether and return the energy to their Light Aether counterparts. Samus agrees to do this and travels between the light and dark dimension to find keys to every dark temple in each area and transfer the energy back to the light. This segments the game differently than Prime 1. Instead of weaving back and forth through areas as you slowly unlock the ability to explore more of them, the areas in this game are more separated, and aside from the Sky Temple keys, which are this game's artifacts, areas are pretty much entirely self-contained. But that's not always the case. In Torvus Bog, after you get Boost Ball, you need to go back to the temple grounds to get the Seeker Launcher, which is a dumb item with a dumb name. But because the way you progress through Aegon Waste made me think that each area would be entirely self-contained until it's done, I had no idea where to go until the game told me.
That was weird. I didn't say that. It sounded like some sort of shallow gimmick that'll never be referenced outside of this video that only exists as a vague reference to the fact that this game's antagonist is a dark reflection of the protagonist.
That's an extremely clunky way to explain this.
Oh no, it's my evil half-twin dark brother, the AJ from the Sonic Adventure 2 thumbnail, because I thought it looked weirder without him in it.
Wow, that line was seamless.
Is bitching all you do?
You're gonna hate editing this segment, you know.
That's irrelevant. If you want to butt your way into this video, be my guest. I'll try not to forget you in the script.
Either way, and this might be because I haven't played this game nearly as much as Prime 1, but even when everything you need is in the same area, I just don't think the game guides you as well as the last game did. Maybe it's because you need to think about not just the light map, but also the entire map of Dark Aether, but I noticed more times where I was lost for a long time because I didn't remember every detail about the area. For example, you get a dark key in the Torvus Bog with the grapple beam, but I didn't even know that it was here in the first place, so when I got the grapple beam, I wandered around almost the whole map for about an hour just trying to remember where I saw grapple points. It's another side effect of how segmented the game is, because I'm less likely to stumble upon where I need to be when the next item is way back at the bottom of an area that story-wise is done and over with. It makes it feel like backtracking, which is normal for Metroid games to have you go back through areas you've already been to with new abilities, but those games would often naturally guide you back to those areas, so even though it was somewhere you've already been through, it still felt like moving forward. This game doesn't really do that. Aside from maybe the one or two elevators that connect each area themselves, but you may not even find them, and sometimes you need to unlock them from a specific direction that you would need to go all the way around to even access. Other than that, the only thing connecting these areas is the temple grounds, meaning walking all the way back the way you came. There's very few shortcuts like in Prime 1, there's often only one route to get to where you need to be. It's not helped that the hints are way more patient. Like I said, this whole session was me wandering around for 50 minutes, and maybe the timer gets reset when you get an item, but I really prefer how quick it was in Prime 1. Speaking of Dark Aether, I hate it. Okay, I don't hate it all that much, but I really don't like exploring it. Firstly, not every portal has a counterpart in the opposing dimension, meaning going through this portal for one missile expansion meant walking all the way to a different one just to get back, and that portal wasn't even in the area that I was supposed to be in. The air is toxic, so when you're not in these safe domes that refill your health, you're constantly taking damage. And man, at the start of the game, does it drain quickly. Every time you step out of a safe zone feels like a mad dash to get to the next one as fast as possible. There's almost no time for exploration. And the safe zones are very slow at refilling your health. The perfect time to take a piss break, but I can only piss so much. It really should have been faster if you weren't in combat, or they should have made health drops way more frequent here like those missions in DMC games with depleting health. Pretty early on you get the Dark Suit, which slows the health drain down a lot and has a metal thong. But this is part of why I feel the light and dark theme works well for the story, but wasn't implemented all that well gameplay wise. Like, this is the suit that you have for a while. A large chunk of this game is spent in this suit before you get the light suit, which negates Dark Aether damage entirely. Like, you get the dark suit so early and the light suit so late that there was a point in time where I thought that this was the only other suit besides Varia. When I first played the game, I played more than 12 hours and got pretty much to the end of the game, and that file is still in the dark suit. And because you get dark so early, I almost forgot how damaging Dark Aether was before it, so I don't really get to appreciate the safety it provides long term. Obviously, having Dark Aether do this much damage for a big portion of the game would have been impossible to make not annoying, not that that stopped them with other parts of the game. So it just feels like this is such an early upgrade because it was required to make the game even playable. It doesn't have the same gratifying feeling that you get when you get Varia in the other games and realize you can go through all those rooms you couldn't before. I don't really feel like I've gotten more powerful. I feel like this is what the base should have been, and in a way it's because of how early you get this. But that's a minor point. The real reason I think the light and dark aspects feel so weak gameplay wise is with the beams. The only beam that returns is the power beam, the other options being the dark and light beam. The only problem is that these have their own ammo that doesn't drop the way missiles and health do. Firstly, even though ammo isn't super hard to get, this makes me extra conservative with them. There's not always an option to refill, and when you do try to refill, sometimes it just says fuck you and doesn't drop any ammo, so I'd rather save it unless it's necessary or at least much more effective. You get light ammo by killing enemies and breaking things with the dark beam and vice versa, which is pretty annoying. First of all, it means that ammo is almost always easy to farm, which makes me wonder the point of having ammo in the first place. Secondly, like I said, the game could be a dick and just not drop shit when you try to farm. With missiles, you get a lot naturally. You don't really need to do anything specific to get them to drop. Needing to specifically switch to a beam and start farming, then switch to the other to top off the shots you just fired, it gets tedious, especially with how often you just get nothing. But the part that makes me feel like this wasn't well thought out was that since you need light beam to get dark ammo and vice versa, you get both pretty much back to back. Once again, there's very little time to explore, see all of the light beam things you can't do, and then feel it all open up once you get it. You get both very early, as opposed to how spread the beams in Prime 1 were, which just makes the gap between light beam and the Annihilator beam all that more noticeable. Speaking of the Annihilator beam, it's fine, it uses both ammo types, so I just save it for charging crystals with both light and dark energy. Since the dark draws enemies in and the light kills them, this does both in one go and makes them look like fucking idiots. The front of the game feels a little loaded with items, and then it almost abruptly slows down, and that's what I'm trying to get at. It feels like they dump all of this stuff at you pretty early on in the game because it's fundamentally required for this game to be even remotely playable. Now, maybe you prefer that. It's not like you stop getting items for the rest of the game, but to me, it just feels like progression was at a weird pace. While items like Grapple Beam and Spider Ball are used often, they don't give me the same sense of progression that things like beams and suits do. Beams and suits affect gameplay moment to moment. Almost every room has something to shoot or do damage to you, so getting a new beam or shoot changes the way that you can approach these encounters. Like in Prime 1, fighting Metroids with missiles and normal beams isn't impossible, but it takes time. So when you get Ice Beam, it's rewarding because now these enemies aren't the threats that they used to be. A lot of the abilities and items are returning from Prime 1, but there are some new ones. The Dark and Echo visors just kind of do what the other visors did in Prime 1. They let you see things you otherwise couldn't. They aren't too intrusive, and you just use them to find some switches to open doors or see enemies you couldn't always see before. And they even improved the scan visor. Now the whole object will glow instead of just a small square. Makes it easier to see. I wish the colors mattered a bit more though. Red is important for progression in some way, and blue is everything else, but scan log entries could be either color. Maybe not red now that I think about it, but my point is, there's no way of knowing what's important. Not that I go for 100% scans, but it would be nice if scan log entries got their own color, unless it was something that you had to scan to move forward. There's the gravity boost, this game's standard for the gravity suit. Other than letting you move freely in water, you also have this jetpack that I honestly think is only used twice, kind of useless after that. Glad I spent an hour trying to get it, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's so little water in this game that it almost feels useless. I spend more time thinking about how it makes Samus look like a fish than actually using it, though I like the remade Meridia theme they use for the water area. There's the Seeker launcher. It sucks. It lets you lock on 5 missiles to fire all at once, which should be useful. I love the Storm missile in Metroid Dread, but it just doesn't work here. Firstly, the game controls are identical to Prime 1, meaning you have the same problem with aiming that I mentioned that time. making it kind of hard to lock onto targets with this unless they're all eye level and standing next to each other. Its only real use is to open doors that require you to break all of these switches at once, except sometimes it doesn't even do that. They got the screw attack in this game though, and it feels pretty good. It doesn't give you shit for vertical height, but it's not all that bad to use, though it's more of an upgrade to the space jump than a screw attack. You're not hitting enemies with this thing. You also use it to wall jump, which again I think is only used a handful of times. Credit where it's due, this game has a lot more bosses than Prime 1. Every area tends to have an item boss, then a boss before the temple, which also drops an item, but that's not important. Too bad the bosses are shit.
Oh hey, you're back. You know, when I said I'd try not to forget you in the script, I was lying.
Like how you forgot Dark Samus was in this game? I mean, kinda, she does sort of just disappear for a while after her first boss fight. Hey, maybe you should follow its lead. And what if I don't? I could always just stop editing you. Ah, peace and quiet. He's right though. The bosses in this game are very hit or miss. There's a lot more than Prime 1, and a lot of them actually use the abilities they end up giving you, like in Metroid Fusion, which is a detail I love. Wish they had cooler names, but beggars can't be choosers.
A lot of the bosses are perfectly fine, but man, some are just oh.
Man, Boost Guardian was a headache. As far as I know, there's no way to control whether or not it crashes into these towers to give you health drops that you'll need because this fight is in Dark Aether and there's no crystals around to save you from the constant damage.
Ready, go!
At least the save point is very close by, so I can get right back in there quickly. If only the rest of the game was like that. This game is atrocious with save points. After this, they almost never put them anywhere near the bosses, which they already designed to be the most annoying things possible. Alpha Block is already annoying enough with how it can combo you, how it's easy to get hit while trying to time your shots and dodges right, but to get to the boss from the last save, you need to go through multiple underwater sections before getting the gravity boost. You go to Dark Aether to fight the most annoying enemy in this game, because you don't have a Dark Visor yet, and I'll get to you fuckers later. Then once you're done in Dark Aether, you go back to activate this last switch to open access to the boss, but this removes your access to the last save until you kill the boss. They did this on purpose. Every failed attempt, you have to go through this whole section again just for another shot. It only took me like 3 tries to get past this fight, but my first attempt started 16 minutes into recording from the nearest save. And those 3 tries combined with getting back there took until 44 minutes and 24 seconds in. I spent an entire session just playing the same section 3 times over and over again. And that's somehow not even the worst one. Spider Guardian has quickly become my least favorite combination of words. Firstly, it's super easy to miss the scan because you can only do it right before you enter the fight. You could go right past this without even realizing it was a major scan, let alone the next boss. But this just takes so long. You have to bomb it until it turns green, then reach the switch for it to cause damage to itself. The problem is, you often have to place bombs in midair, making it hard to time. Its hitbox is massive as balls. Bomb jumping was not made for situations like this. You need to be so precise with not only where you put the bomb, but also where you are when it explodes, because this piece of shit morph ball gets caught on anything and completely stops if you're even a pixel off. And some of the assholes put a bunch of slopes here to make it worse. And you have to not only avoid this little bitch who will launch you to Kingdom Come if you so much as think about getting close to it, but it's also on a strict time limit and you can only extend it by bombing it again, but its hitbox is so big and its hurtbox is so small that the only way you would have known this is through dumb luck. This piece of shit. Oh, and to make it worse, the distance between this boss and the last save is just as bad as the Alpha Blog. This section isn't annoying, but some hole intentionally blocked your way back by requiring Spider Ball to get back, and it ain't a short stroll back from the last save. You have this color puzzle, fighting these things, going to see the dead asshole that made them in the Light Temple, then going back out only for these assholes to be here this time. Then you go back to the boss that's so slow you could probably make the end die of old age before reaching the 3rd phase. If the game had crashed before I made it to another save, I'd have quit like I did Crash Bash and Sonic and the Secret Rings. I have never hated a section in a video game more than this. And it wouldn't be so bad if they didn't intentionally put save points far away, forcing you to replay sections of the game and just have another shot at the boss that's so asinine. They probably made it as a sick joke to with each other and then forgot to take it out of the game before launch. At least Alpha Blog had a rhythm you could get into. They did not make the morph ball precise enough for boss fights, and they do it 2 times. This, I don't even know what this thing is, which is also an easy scan to miss, but it's much better than Spider Bitch over here. but bomb jumping and boost balling off of spider tracks just weren't designed to be used in tight reactionary situations like this. The fastest reflexes in the world couldn't save you from how unpolished this shit feels. It's like they meant to add spring ball but forgot. I can only assume that this is much better in Prime Trilogy, but testing that theory would require getting back to this point, meaning doing all this shit a second time, and that.
Oh, wait, what the Why am I censored all of a sudden?
Oh, I thought it would be funny. I'll turn it off.
Don't you have like a job or something you could be at instead of bothering me while I'm trying to make a video?
No, I'm the evil version of you. You have a job, so I can't have one.
Oh, well then it's a good thing I don't go outside, so enjoy that and fuck off.
The bosses themselves aren't the problem most of the time, and most of the other bosses are actually decent, a bit tedious at times, but I enjoyed the fights against the Chica Adult, Powerbomb Guardian, Dark Samus Grapple Guardian. While they're not great, honestly pretty repetitive and tedious at times, I don't have problems with these guys really at all.
But the fact that a lot of these boss fights are intentionally put in places that lock you out of the nearest save until you get whatever item you need to beat the boss to get makes this game incredibly annoying at times.
Kind of like some of the enemies, like the Dark Commandos. These guys are like the Chozo Ghosts from Prime 1, but while they were a bit tedious before getting the X-ray visor, it was manageable because they weren't hard to get a beat on. These fuckers might have a 2-frame window of vulnerability for all I know. Until you get the Dark Visor, these fights just take forever. There's a good chance that they might just fuck off before you even kill them. The other enemies aren't nearly as annoying, but they're not much better either. They still take forever to kill, like these security bots, which have an attack that you boost ball into, but it's impossible to be in morph ball and stay a safe distance without the camera trying its best to keep the enemies off screen. There are these bigger security guys that just tank attacks or require you to keep switching beam types, these floating balls that also take forever to kill and can just fucking DDoS your suit. Also, a weird thing I noticed was that there was only one of these things as far as I know. Just a little bug that carries a dome of light that moves, but I never saw him again. I guess it makes sense, he's the
Light bringer. I'm the fucking universe.
It sucks because the feeling that stood out most when playing this game, the feeling that was the strongest, was annoyance.
Don't get me wrong, this is still Metroid Prime. A lot of what that first game did is still present here, and I'd say a vast majority of the game feels exactly like a continuation of that first game. But the lows are so plentiful and they get pretty low at times, and they all stem from what makes this game unique. The things that make this game stand out are the reason I just don't like it that much.
The beam ammo, the boss fights, the multiple enemies that are sponges, the multiple enemies that are hard to hit, the emphasis put on morph ball despite it not being designed for these kind of things. This was me every time I saved by the Sanctuary section of the game, which has its own gaggle of problems, mainly being that exploring it ain't fun. I was exhausted by this game. After returning the energy to the third temple, Umos tells you that the final source of energy is in the Dark Sky Temple, but to access it you need 9 keys all hidden in Dark Aether. He gives you a suit made of the energy you retrieved to make you immune to the atmosphere and water on Dark Aether, to make this not even glorified fetch quest way easier. While there are only 9 keys, I prefer the artifacts over these. Firstly, the hints weren't helpful, and secondly, you're less likely to stumble across these early, because not only are they in Dark Aether, which you might just be avoiding again because it sucks, but you need Dark Visor to reveal them, and Dark Aether just isn't as connected as Light Aether, so you often need to go through a specific portal to find your way to the keys. Once you do gather the keys and open your way to the Sky Temple, you fight the Emperor Ing, which is a pretty easy fight through all of its phases. Only problem is there was pretty much no feedback on bombing it during the Spider Ball segment, so I had no clue if I was doing anything. The final phase is just the Metroid Prime pretty much. You shoot it based on what color its mouth is, though I feel like you miss a lot more in this game. This game is weird. I've never seen so many charge shots, missiles, hell even beam combos just miss. So it got a little annoying. Once it dies, the place starts coming down, but during your escape you have one final battle with Dark Samus, who is really looking worse for wear. It's a piss easy fight, seeing as how I had like 3 minutes to spare even though I didn't know what I was doing for half of it. But in my defense, how was I supposed to know that what I was actually supposed to do was let its attack hit me while charging to shoot through its shield? Dark Samus evaporates and Samus returns to Aether to return the last of the power, while the surviving Luminoth thank her, then she leaves the planet.
Well, that was a video game. But I've talked a lot of shit, and I want to highlight some of the things the game does do well, because there's a reason I didn't finish Sonic and the Secret Rings and Crash Bash when those games annoyed me. But I did finish this, and there is a reason for that.
Firstly, I think the game nails the dreadful atmosphere it goes for. While the areas can be a bit bland to look at and sometimes blend in, especially Dark Aether, the feeling of exploring a world that's in a stalemate of a war is perfect. Darth Aether especially is Darth? Did I say Darth? Dark Aether especially is filled with the last efforts of the Luminoth to fight off the Ing. Light crystals, bodies everywhere, robots that were taken over by the Ing. Every temple has a hologram of a fallen Luminoth to guide you, and you hear some of their last regrets. The only problem is there's still a lot of lore you have to stop and read. The Luminoth lore isn't necessary because you're told a lot of what you need to know, and you can also just observe the world. This just serves world building. But man, what are the space pirates doing here with Talon-formed Metroids? They're here because of the Phazon and Dark Aether. They're still interested in its effects, and you know what? I don't blame them. A Metroid started drinking that stuff and not only got super big, but when it was killed, it just came back again in the image of its killer. I'd want some of that shit too. But you wouldn't know about their purpose here or their run-ins with Dark Samus or why this one is floating in a tank with Metroids without reading the lore, which I didn't do because I forgot.
Man, what a step down from Prime 1. Like I said, a lot of this game is annoying, if not downright infuriating. But it's still Metroid Prime.
Everything from the first game is here, rewarding exploration, great atmosphere and immersion. The reason I focused so much on the bad was because it's just easier to explain. They make it very easy to explain where there are multiple times where the only thing keeping me from taking this game out of my Gamecube and eating it was because it would cost a lot of money to replace. The good aspects don't have that luxury. In order to truly understand the good parts of this game, and Metroid Prime 1 for that matter in a lot of ways, you just have to play it for yourself. You have to play it to feel the immersion, to feel rewarded by exploring. It's something hard to describe, but if you like Prime 1, then you should have no problem getting through this one.
Because again, I only hate certain aspects of this game and certain sections of this game. As a whole, I'd say I enjoyed it. I wasn't dreading playing it. I was playing it pretty often and never got sick of it. I think it was worth it to play through those low points for the satisfaction of having finally beat it.
But it's not worth the price a lot of people want for it. If you find a copy at a price you're willing to pay, then I'd say go for it. But I wouldn't take a chance on it if you're iffy. You can always play Prime 1. Like the game itself, there are two sides to it. The light side being more Metroid Prime, albeit slightly less visually interesting. The dark side being some of the most dreadful and frustrating moments and not well thought out choices. The game's public perception also shares the dark and light theme, because a lot of people share my sentiment on how annoying this game is and agree that it's a pretty big step down from Prime 1. But a lot of people pick this as their favorite in the series. And they're wrong, but it's not like I can make a legal case about it.
Well, that game's under my belt, and my evil doppelganger just so happened to disappear, which is convenient because I couldn't think of a way to write him into this outro. So next time we will be taking a look on the DS, because before we got Metroid Prime 3, we got Metroid Prime Hunters. Until then, have a great day, a beautiful morning, awesome night, and I'll see you next mission.